Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast spotlights. I'm Nico.
Yeah, and I'm Chris.
And we're back at it, taking questionable selfies with Cal. And
our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yes. Welcome back, Cal.
Great intro.
If you haven't guessed it, this is the continuation of our Spotlight series on this Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy with special guest Cal. If you haven't listened to the first part, go back and listen to it.
Absolutely.
So, Spider-Man 2, the much-beloved sequel that some tote as better than the first one.
We did not have to wait long for this one to come out. This only came out in 2004. First one was 2002. It's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, for sure.
Not as quick as nowadays. Let's not lie to ourselves. We've gotten maybe a little bit too quickly now. But, I mean, for back then, this was pretty quick. I was used to waiting like 5 years for a movie sequel.
Fair.
And even I think 2 is a good waiting period because it's not too long where they don't think about the movie again, but it's just enough where like you have them wanting more, because 5 years, way too long. 3 years, it's starting to get to that point where they're probably trying to move on and think of other things. But 2, right when it's starting to settle and they're trying to go look for other things, that comes out. So
yeah, well, and it's interesting you bring up the how long it waits for things to change, because this one we have a new screenplay writer, Alvin Sargent, with screen story by Alfred Goh, Miles Mallar, and Michael Chabon, based on the Marvel Comics by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Raimi's back, and the only main cast that really changes is Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, or Dr. Octavius. But the reason we have a change in writers is that David Cope's interest wasn't what it used to be when he moved on to other projects from this. Not that his projects have failed. I mean, dude's done quite a bit. I mean, he went on to do Secret Window, Zathura, War of the Worlds, Ghost World, Angels and Demons.
Oh, Angels and Demons. What a movie.
So, but the thing is, he originally had a plan for this Spider-Man trilogy. And so this is where we start to see it kind of go off a little bit from what potentially could have been.
And I think you see it most with Doc Ock in this one.
Mm-hmm.
I think having Tobey back as Superman really helps with solidifying. Having Raimi back as director really helps keep the tone and the pacing similar. We get Doc Ock, and yeah, he's a very good bad guy, but he is not quite as that perfect combination like we talked about in the last episode, where he's not the perfect embodiment of both goofy and terrifying. He's just a little lacking in both categories to really hit it home.
Yeah.
He's close. He's damn close. But he's just not... When he's meant to be terrifying, he's a little extra goofy because them stupid arms are always in the background flailing around. Or when he's meant to be a little bit more kid-friendly bad guy, just clear-cut, oh, this is my bad guy, punch time. You're starting to get like a little bit of existential crisis in the wrong moment. Like, stop monologuing. This is the fight moment. Let's go.
You're getting into something I want to talk about a little bit later with the characters.
I bet.
There is an evolution in the villains for Peter.
Oh, is there ever an evolution in Spider-Man bad guys?
Cal, what do you think about the time skip from Spider-Man 1 to Spider-Man 2, where it's this huge jump from living with Harry to living on his own? The friend group's kind of split up a little bit, / they get together very awkwardly for birthdays still.
I think it works in a way because it takes the time to establish the characters that they've been doing their own thing and just not trying to go for play-by-play for what happened from point A to point B. Like, some of the comics have done time jumps like that as well, and it's worked because at the end of the day, nothing really that important could have happened, and even then, if it did, they would have referenced it or elaborated on it. So I think it works. It gives them some time to grow instead of just kind of being the same place, just slowly growing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it gives room to excuse any potential plot or writing holes that might crop up under too close a scrutiny. When you have your characters like we do with modern Marvel movies, where everything's happening back to back or even on top of each other in some movies' cases, even with such a tight writing team that they have, like with all of the money and people and manpower behind it, there's still spots where it's like, oh, yeah, that doesn't quite flow as well as if maybe we had just left it up to the imagination. You know? Having that time gap leaves us room for like, well, what did Spider-Man eat for breakfast? Nobody really freaking cares.
Yeah, how did it get brought up in conversation that Harry and Peter don't want to live in the same apartment together anymore. Or
Like-
Harry doesn't offer Peter a room. Instead, Peter takes his shitty 1-bedroom apartment.
And like at the end of the day, it's more important to know that like that's the dynamic and that's where
Mhm.
we currently are than watching like another movie that had come out in like say 2003 trying to dynamically show the devolving friendship of the Spider-Man group. Like I
Yeah.
don't truly care. It's fine. They can just do it.
Also, it's not really that deep. Like, we already knew they're going to fall out as it is, because what happened to the previous one, they were already at a really rough point as it is, so it makes sense that things really haven't improved between all of them at the beginning with, because it looks very rough. Like you mentioned, they had the awkward birthday. Whenever Peter and Harry talked in that scene, it was really fucking awkward, if I'm being honest, because of course he asked them right away, and Peter's in the place of, do I tell him? Do I not tell him? Because it's going to be bad regardless, so.
And I think the third one does arguably again a little bit worse of a job, and
Mhm.
we'll get to it when we get to the third movie. But I still think these first three do a better job of letting the audience just use their reasoning skills and their media literacy to kind of understand the movie better. Whereas I think once we get farther and farther into the Spider-Man world and movie production in general in time, your hand gets held so much that like it doesn't feel like you're finding like answers or solving any riddles for yourself. It feels like you're just like pointing out stuff to yourself in the movie.
Mhm.
It's not quite as much fun, at least to me.
Yeah, it's like putting a mask over the subject that you're trying to talk about and say, hey, look at this. This person is the embodiment of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And I think with that, I mean, there's, I think, don't get me wrong, second movie starts off relatively solid too. I do think under a little bit more critical lens, it still is a little bit of a rough opening or intro because I mean, it gives enough time to show that Peter's become comfortable with his daily life as a superhero. I mean, we still see that he's struggling with it. There's still this focus that he's kind of an outsider because he can't do his job. He can't go to college. The only thing that roughly maybe seems to be going right for him is being a superhero. But there's still that bit of trying to make him as this fix. He feels more of just like a fixture within New York, like one of the rug guys that you hear about, one of the two rug guys you hear about.
I would say there's now, unfortunately, two.
But he's still not that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man because there's some mention that the Daily Bugles turned the city against him, and it's like, but did it really? Like, you weren't really that important to the city in the first movie outside of the bridge scene. That's like the only time we see him as like important to New York City as a whole.
Okay, but let me just say this. If this sort of maybe lazy story putting together hadn't happened, I don't think the groundwork would have been placed for later on Spider-Man franchise and movies to be like, look how easily the Bugle goes against Spider-Man. If it wasn't for all of these previous Spider-Mans, and this one being the first one to be like, well, you know, the Bugle just kind of says, fuck you, Spider-Man, whenever it wants, and everyone's fine with it.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, for me, it's just this hard transition from going directly from 1 to 2. I'm sure if I had watched these spaced out over the course of...
That is the key.
Yeah, exactly. The course of it being released, I probably would have forgotten enough of Spider-Man 1 going into Spider-Man 2 being like, okay, I remember the Bugle not liking him, but like there's, again, media literacy, putting the cues together of like, okay, maybe he has built up the notoriety, but it's just not seen. It's this return to focus on the human characters that I think kind of complicates that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they, right from the get-go, make Peter and Mary's relationship just super awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. I get why. But it's an extra layer to be worrying about on top of, like, they just tell you one bad thing after the other for the first, like, 10 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, Aunt May's not doing well. Their house is going to be foreclosed.
And I love that, like, because Aunt May we're still at old Aunt May. We haven't, like, de-aged Aunt May to, like, when you say, oh, Aunt May's not doing well, to new Aunt May, maybe she's having a rough day. Old Aunt May, is she okay? Did she break a hip? Is she fine?
Well, maybe it's something with my thoughts on where Peter's at the start of this movie is that he's become stagnant in his role as a superhero, whereas others are moving on with their lives and careers, and he's barely holding it together. And Cal, maybe this is the point, or maybe you can correct me if this is supposed to tie into something else, but I think it starts to make him relatable as a little bit older in this movie, and especially watching it now as an adult. That trying to balance everything in your life, whereas like as a kid watching this movie, it's like, okay, I've got school, I've got sports, I can still play video games at night for 2 to 3 hours at night.
Sure. Yeah, you're not in charge of your own schedule.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense because he's meant to be the hero that we can all relate to. Because like you can't really relate to Batman, you can't relate to like Wonder Woman or Thor because they're just not something you can relate to. Versus now, that's kind of ties into why I like his comics now as an adult because he's struggling with everything all at once, and I just read him like I get some comfort in it because he's in a way we're going through the same kind of ish struggles because he's trying to balance his work with his other life as well, and just trying to have a social life with people and just trying to really just get by. And I love that about that. That's why I think this film did a really good job with it because you kind of see the problems there in the first one, but you really don't see it until this one where now he's past high school, where he's past the awkward teen phase. He's now just trying to get by. And like you said, you really get it more as an adult because as a kid, I could understand, but I couldn't relate to it in any way because I was like, well, how old was I? I was like 7 or 8 when this came out, so I didn't really know what that was like. And you don't really know what that's like until you get to that phase in your life where it's now I'm tired, I want to go to bed. But when I was younger, I could just stay up all night and game with my friends. Now I want to go to bed. It's 9:30 and people are being too loud across the street. So
Absolutely. And I think this is also, I think for me, a little bit more believable of a Spider-Man story of like him coming of age and like trying to figure out his way in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think the newer Spider-Mans, because we have this bigger, more detailed web of superheroes, it's very obvious to be like, well, of course he's going to have mentors. Why would anyone in the Marvel universe just let Superman, this kid, run around by himself?
Mm-hmm.
There's 800 superheroes who have nothing better to do with their day.
Yeah, well,
whereas with this one, it makes a whole lot of sense, and like I think it's what makes Octavius like an interesting character for the first half of the movie because he fills in that like mentorship role that's like really an empty void. Like who else could fill it? We've barely had any superhero movies and barely any that overlap in any way.
yeah, because at the end of the day, like that's something I was about to mention next is they made the best use of this smaller universe because, like you've mentioned, like they even reference it like in Ant-Man specifically because there was whatever I don't remember exactly what the context of it was, but he even says, "I would just call the Avengers. Doesn't make any sense. Like I'm not ready for this," and that's something they could never do in these films. And I love that the small universe really works well because really we didn't have any shared universe because there's a random scene at the very end where you see a guy looking at a camera. And that's meant to be the Punisher because they were trying to set up a bigger universe, but you guys wouldn't have known that just from one guy looking at the camera, and I had to Google that to find out. And there really is no really big tie to the universe.
Actually, there is a small one, and it's done as a joke, but I think it hints at what they were going for. I think it works well because it is such a subtle little nod. Same with like him yelling Shazam when they're trying to name Doc Ock.
Yeah, Doctor Strange. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's name him Doctor Strange. Wait, that's already taken.
Yeah.
Implying that Doctor Strange is within this universe, but we never see him. And I think that's something that I think that's why these movies hold up comparatively to rewatching some of the others or having to like rewatch and like having to watch all these other ones to even get caught up to a certain point.
Yeah.
Is that they are self-contained.
And it is kind of nice, but I also can see where maybe some of the hopes were also going because originally the hope of X-Men was, oh, well, we finally have the licensure. We can finally have the crossover because in the comic book world, that's an easy one to do. X-Men end up everywhere. But the licensing just wouldn't let them. Spider-Man ended up in the same like legal hellhole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there just wasn't the opportunity. But we've talked about this before. That movies that have limitations on them tend to just be more interesting. Maybe not necessarily better, but more interesting than ones that have as much money and as much story and backing power as possible. And I think this is a great example. This movie's not perfect. I mean, looking at Doc Ock now, after all these years, hurts my eyes.
See, I don't have that though.
Specifically the arms hurt my eyes, and it's because I know that a more use of the practical prop would have been better and more interesting to look at because they look so fake CGI. It feels extra green screeny. And And the only reason that bothers me, because we've talked about how I don't really care a ton about a bad CGI. I'll watch a lot of bad CGI. I've watched a shark with 5 heads run around on land, and I enjoyed every minute.
Oh yeah, no, this weekend I watched one called Cockroach Invasion that was about mutant cockroaches on a ship.
Is that the one where the cockroach gets really big?
No, they all come together to form like kind of a person.
Yes,
they take over
okay.
some bodies and control them like zombies.
I'm gonna have to look up which is the one where the cockroaches mutate into just people and they just get large people size.
That's Terraform Mars.
Okay.
Takashi Miike did the live action adaptation.
Yes, that was the one I thought you were going for here.
But, I almost watched that right after.
Like, I'll watch garbage, but seeing how good the first one looked, because again, there was a lot of practical props, especially for the Green Goblin, and that's what made him both an interesting, fun, but also scary bad guy. Doc Ock's arms feel so detached from Doc Ock that multiple scenes in this movie, I'm not convinced that they are attached to his body, and thus they are not scary. They're just weird and silly, like a dog tail.
Like when you try and attach pool noodles to your back to try and pretend to be Doc Ock.
It's like trying to stand on a pool noodle. It's doing its own thing, and like some scenes it looks fine, and those I think are the ones where it's closer up and they are practical effects. But yeah, the CGI on this one hurts so much worse than the first one, and that kind of sucks because he's a cool bad guy. He's not as cool as Green Goblin, but he could have been.
Yeah. Well, Cal, what are your thoughts on the noodly appendages?
They won't sit still.
I kind of agree because there are some scenes where I'm like that looks a little bit spotty, but like you've mentioned, I watched a lot of the behind the scenes of this specifically because I loved how they did the arms, and when they showed like the close-ups or like the very brief scenes, like one of them, yeah, the puppetry it shows, the practical effects shows, and I'm kind of amazed because when I'm gonna compare these movies a lot to No Way Home because they brought back these villains, but in No Way Home it's all CGI. It looks just it looks just too artificial. I could just tell like, okay, he's really not there. Like he's just on a green screen versus like some of the scenes with just one of them talking to him. Like, wow, that looks like a snake almost. Like the way they're talking to him. It's like some ways they just did such a great job with it. And like hearing how they had 4 different puppeteers working them, they named the tentacles. Like I absolutely love that. Again, Sam Raimi practical effects there, but some of the fights, like I said, when you look at the faces, I'm like, that looks just awful because I could tell it's like a PS2 level graphics, and the arms, unfortunately, they're attached to his body, so they're just not going to look as good. So when they went really hard, yeah, I think they went hard with it. When CGI wasn't where it was in 2004 or 3 when this was being worked on, so unfortunately, it shows because it is a 21-year-old film. So for the most part, I really love it.
Yeah, I agree. The practical effect arms looked so cool, and then unfortunately we switched to a CGI scene almost immediately after, and I was like, "Oh."
But the way this movie has to be dynamic and what he ends up doing, there is not really any way around that. I mean, that's just something where like you are limited by the technology of the time, but you're also working with the best you can.
That's true, and he's not the worst villain. We'll get to those.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about that later.
Well, and here's the thing with Doc Ock is that he is a little bit of a repeat of Norman again. But in this time, I think they do him more justice as being that potential mentor to Peter and not just a professional life, but also in his love life. We have that one dinner together where like they really, really bond. I mean, it also sets him up for hope as well as the sadness and potential and his eventual failure, but also it's another reflection of what Peter could have become with this ambition. It's kind of a repeat of the first movie, just a little bit differently. But it also serves as a way to show that it gives another emotional beat to what Parker could have gone through of if he had faced the grief of losing his uncle the same way Doc Ock lost his wife.
Yeah.
What could have happened? But here's where I think they do a similar thing of where Doc Ock and the Green Goblin both accidentally get turned into monsters.
Yes.
And then on top of that, they have these kind of split personalities where there's these two sides to them.
It's
where
very Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, very much so. Norman has that other side to him that comes out every now and then that we only see through him, but we have his actual like relatively good person come through of like, I mean, relatively. I mean, he's still an asshole to Harry in the first movie.
Yeah.
But Doc Ock on the other side is he's lost by his ambition to try and bring his wife back or actually have some meaning for her death and that making the experiment work. But at that same time, he's the one who's not in control of his the monster at that point.
I was going to ask how you guys felt in this world of now everything having AI. How do we feel about the real villain of the story being AI?
It's aged well, I'll give you that. Because when I was watching that, I'm like, that's funny how they're kind of pointing out that this is AI getting too smart, and they even ask, "Oh, what happens if it gets too smart? Wouldn't it control you?" He's like, "Don't worry, I got that." And then not even 5 minutes later, that chip is immediately destroyed. So
absolutely,
yeah, I agree with that. That is the more terrifying part of this movie is that it's AI that's basically creating a black hole.
Yeah. The part that like now watching it all these years later was on the verge of upsetting was usually with these old movies and especially like sci-fi or superhero movies, the technology might like be named the same, but it's so far off of what we actually do now that it's like, oh, look at the silly Spy Kids microwave. That's never gonna happen. Like it's normally like that level of crazy, right? And like occasionally you'll see a superhero movie where they're like, oh well, you know, the military does have wire that's as strong as Spider-Man's, but like some bullshit like that, and you're like, oh, it's this one experiment, and like it's not like in use in the way that Spider-Man uses it, you know, that sort of thing. This is one of the ones where like, no, this is pretty one for one, and that really like kind of like made me pause and be like, oh no, this is a little Star Trek and it's like future guessing.
Boston Dynamics.
Yeah, like a little too close to home here, Spider-Man.
Even then, like we didn't really have AI being incorporated into things because the internet was a thing, but it wasn't nearly as the way it was today with like search. Like the most we would have had if we did was it would have been like, hey, you might like this on like YouTube or something, or like suggested things like, oh, did you mean this instead, or here's other things we recommend. Not where AI is something that people actively use, like they go to ChatGPT for like, how do I do this with my life, and they rely and depend on ChatGPT or other AI to just function at this point. So
I just had a discussion with one of the lads on Wednesday. We went out for some drinks, and one of them said he thought he could take a panda, and I'm like, dude,
no, you can't. It's a bear.
No, you cannot.
Literally a bear.
He went to ChatGPT to see if he could find a bear.
I know who this is without even needing to ask.
Uncle Fuego.
Yeah, of course. No, the other thing that I remember is like when this came out, it was like this was kind of the start of like not actually AI stuff being named AI, so it felt like really silly for the AI to like do this. Like there was like a new microwave that had like a quote unquote AI button, and all it did was nuke things for 30 seconds at like half power.
Yeah, the most AI we had was Clippy.
Yeah, no, and like Clippy is not actually AI. He didn't learn anything, he didn't respond to anything, he just looked for patterns and had a like given response. He didn't learn. And there would be buttons on random ass shit and be like, the AI for your ceiling fan, and all it did was like oscillate between on and off slowly, and you're like, oh, well, AI's that's a silly futuristic technology, and unfortunately they really nailed what AI might be. Unfortunately, it's like a little bit too good, which then like makes it extra bad because it's paired with the most silly snake arms to ever grace a man in a trench coat.
And I was rewatching Blade Runner right before recording this, and that's set in 2019.
Oh, I know. I love watching a quote unquote future movie, and it's just so far off. And like normally that's like a part of the fun, right? And unfortunately, this one, the fun was maybe a little too close to home. So unfortunately, Doc Ock went from being like a really good, like, oh wow, that's a fun kids villain, to like, oh no, yeah, that might happen. Sort like that. It got too close to not silly, and they did not mean that in any way. Like this is just an accident on what happened, because this something very scary was paired with very distracting puppet arms just snaking around in the background doing their own damn thing.
Yeah,
it's something that I didn't really think much about until now, but it makes a lot of sense considering the way AI is now. And I'm thinking of this recent article I saw about ChatGPT where this guy was kind of feeding his AI bot his own like warp conspiracy, and it told him to kill his mom and himself, and he did that. And just thinking how far AI has come in the past in few years, like I'm not gonna say like sit there and it's like, oh, it's gonna happen eventually, but at the same time, it makes things like Terminator or what we just discussed, it doesn't seem that far out of the realm of possibilities, considering we keep saying, oh, it could never happen. People would never listen to machines or machines wouldn't outsmart us. And like, it's doing it now. It's already doing it now, and people are willingly just going along with it because they just don't know any better. Or like they or a tweet I saw the other day where this kid was showing how he wrote all of his essays on ChatGPT and how people are just so dependent on AI now. Like it makes me think. I mean, we are kind of getting dumber at the end of the day.
It changes these types of movies from back then when people be like, "Oh, that could happen," and it changes it from being like "Oh, that's kind of like a bit far out there," like "Oh, it's a little conspiracy theory silly," to like, "Oh no, I see it. I don't wanna, but I see it."
Like that could probably happen in 10 years or 15 years from now because the way things are going now. So
the only thing keeping real Doc Ock from existing is unfortunately those mechanical arms will only live at the moment in delightful puppetry because unfortunately the weight and length of them is, as they found out in trying to manufacture them, too much.
Oh, the hubris of
robotics, really.
Yeah. Well, and that's maybe that ties into a little bit of this is the kind of turning back on your responsibility of Doc Ock turns his back on the responsibility of conducting his experiments in a safe manner.
Sure.
And he deals with that by ends up killing his wife.
Yeah.
Parker in the first movie turned his back on his uncle, ends up in his death.
True. And the other thing that I thought was a little silly was we're now at the second movie, and with the first one we talked about how unfortunately just the way that these old movies work and how there's just not enough cinematic time to add lots of interesting and like relatable, useful people. We have now kidnapped the only other woman in Peter's life, Aunt May.
Yeah.
We need to insert another woman quickly because movie 3 was planned.
Yeah, going back to the female characters, I mean, Mary Jane is still that.
She's still the. I mean, and that makes sense, right? Like she's canon. She has to exist the way she does. Sure, but like there was like a little sniggling of hope in the back of my mind where like, oh, I could see how this would have been the movie to insert a few more friends for Peter Parker to like start to branch out. And I'd argue that's maybe the best thing the newer Spider-Mans have tried to work in.
Well, I think there is something there with him being rejected by and pushing him further as an outsider. Mary Jane is no longer that person. She's engaged.
Yeah.
Harry is no longer really his friend.
No.
Aunt May is the only person he has an attachment to in his life, other than what he could have had with his landlord's daughter.
True, and I mean, again, this movie does a good job of bringing up all of the tough topics of like in early adulthood, like it is very easy to accidentally end up with no friends. You have to like actively be focusing and trying on so many things. And even like later on in the movie where we start like getting into more of the superhero fight sort of mindset and less about the relationships and what's happening with Peter, they do a good job, I think, of trying to tie all of this in so that way it does feel like maybe Peter's a little distracted or not focused enough on Doc Ock.
Yeah.
Like at no point does it just like hard cut to just, all right, time to save New York. You kind of feel like all the time there's like little bits being sprinkled throughout the plot to kind of keep it in mind that like he's not just Spider-Man. He's also Peter Parker whose life sucks.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it doesn't, at least with this, I think it does a very good job because I mean, obviously it hasn't been adapted in the other Spider-Man movies, but it made sense why he had the web lock on why he was losing his powers and why everything was just going back to the way it used to be because he was just so overwhelmed with everything. Because you make a really good point that I forgot about. That really I experience now since I started working from home. It is very easy to just not make friends as an adult because when you're in school, you're kind of forced to have social interactions with people because you don't really have a choice. You can't, even if you're trying to avoid talking to people, you kind of can't. In college, same idea. You're kind of forced into a social situation. Yeah, it is a little bit easier just to go and chill in your room or your apartment, but for the most part, you're going to have to talk to other people. You can't really avoid that for that reason. So I think it all makes sense when you look on it just objectively on how it led to what it did. But as you mentioned previously, just I don't love that how they wrote a lot of their women characters because you only had MJ who was a plot device, Ursula who kind of only came in very briefly and honestly I think you should have ended up with her and MJ. That's just my take, but And that's really the only other characters, because you have Aunt May, but that's not going to be a romantic interest, and that's really it. Everybody
Yeah.
else is either just background or they've died, like Otto's wife.
Yeah. So in that regard, with Aunt May, with taking responsibility, because I mean that is the biggest message of this movie is like the last movie, with great power comes great responsibility. This one is a returning to that. He has this great power, so it's more about like what he has to contribute to the world. But his revealing of his involvement to Aunt May about Uncle Ben's death, what do you think about that?
A little
It's
indifferent about it. I don't love it, but I kind of think it was necessary to happen because we got that really good scene about what you just mentioned, so it had to happen. It's just for it hard to be like, oh, don't worry about it. It's just water on the bridge. Like it would have made more sense if she was a little more upset about things or just didn't come forward about it. I also wondered why at no point, because like you guys have mentioned, his neighbors have to know he's Spider-Man because there's only so much you could think. Oh, what are you gonna say? Either that's your partner or it's you. So I am just kind of more surprised they never once had a scene where she kind of asked him more questions, like because I think it's kind of obvious she figured out he was Spider-Man, but never once said it. And there's a couple other characters that have sort of figured it out. So
Oh yeah, like the assistant or the editor for
yeah,
the
Robbie.
Daily
Yeah,
Bugle, just like
like
your
tell,
friend
I heard Spider-Man was there.
Spider-Man was there.
best friend Spider-Man. Yeah.
And he just looks at him like, yeah, I know. Like, it's like that one meme from Dexter that's been all over the internet. Like, oh, I know. I can't prove it, but I know you know. And like her, she definitely figured it out. There's no way she couldn't have because she wasn't that dumb. Or maybe she really was that oblivious, but I don't know. But
Well, and like granted, this is at the cusp of that level of self-aware humor and like letting that sort of idea happen in a superhero universe. Now I'm like it's so easy to imagine that extra one line or that extra little quick scene of like Aunt May being like, "Goddamn Spider-Man," while she picks up his room or something.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to imagine that, but you have to remember that like I mean even 2004 we're so much closer in superhero logic and the theming to old Superman movies. Like that's really the root of a lot of these themes and why Spider-Man looks and behaves the way he does. He's just teenage version of Superman in a lot of ways. And that makes so much more sense because there wasn't need to explain all of that because this was based on like those 50s and 60s style comics and movies, so that sort of logic didn't need to happen because they were all meant to be like a little bit fun, lighthearted, teach a good moral to the kids and move on.
Yeah, let you connect the dots, let you be an intelligent viewer.
And I agree. I think it'd been very cool to have that like little extra bits, and it's fun that like we've reached that point where like I expect that now out of a superhero movie. I expect someone to have like thought that through. But at the same time, I'm not surprised and I'm not terribly upset because like I'm willing to put that in myself in my head to the movie because I'm like, well, you know, there's only so much we're dealing with here, and honestly, I'm more interested in how this final big like reveal and then eventually getting back to the Green Goblin like equipment at the very end. That's like all feels like such a rewarding build that I'm not terribly worried about some of the plot holes.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said now where a lot of the MCU movies, and I think it's for the worse now, because at first it was kind of cool to help everybody catch up to date, but now since it's so ingrained in our pop culture, we're so spoon-fed every little detail about every little thing that happens, or we're getting a spin-off for every little thing, and I don't think we really need that, which really can tie back what you guys said earlier. This had limitations. Yeah, they had a Wolverine cameo planned, I think either in this or in the previous one. They wanted to do more. They really wanted to lead into that, and I think they even tried to, but they couldn't get Wolverine or Hugh Jackman's schedule to align with theirs. But I think it works really well with those limitations because, like I said, modern Marvel, I guess in hindsight now, we're getting everything. We have so much that I don't even want to keep up to date because there's just no point to, because some of it might go nowhere. Some of it might just be a waste of time. Some of it might actually serve some purpose. But for the most part, like you could probably skip a majority of it and know what's going on, because I've been doing that, and I love Marvel, but I've been skipping some of their other shows because I don't care. Like, what's the point of this? Like, why do I want to keep up with this one character that you haven't really introduced it? And it's just, I mean, it's cool we're getting these adaptations if you're a big fan, but not everyone's gonna know or care. So,
Well, and I think a big part of it too is like this movie does a good job of balancing like what our actual interest is. For our interest in Spider-Man 2 is Spider-Man himself and Doc Ock, the main bad guy. The rest of the story all falls and revolves around that, whereas in the newer shows especially, and the newer movies, it's really so much more of less of like, oh, you're interested in this character, let me introduce you to this show you're gonna love, it's all about them. And it's less about that and really more of, oh, well, you really need to watch this episode, this show or this movie, because that ties this character to this character and explains how this person knows that person. And at the end of the day, I love watching just a Spider-Man film and a guy with octopus arms. Like that's it boils down to just, it's a superhero movie, and I enjoy watching just something for fun. I don't need a full documentary.
And if you can't really just go into it as a standalone, like I don't think it's gonna work as well. Like there, even some of the modern Spider-Man shows now, like they immediately show other characters. Like in the newest one they just did, they showed off Venom in the very first 10 minutes. They showed off Doctor Strange. They showed off all these other characters. And I look back at the older shows, I'm like, oh, that's funny because they took their time before they ever showed in new, like in one of the 90s shows, they took like a season or two before they really introduced the wider Marvel universe. Like they brought in other characters like Blade and the Punisher. They didn't try to do that immediately just because that's what people were interested in. People want to see the character for what he is and what he does, not his everybody else, the supporting characters he has with him as well. So,
well, maybe it's this. I think it's wholeheartedly this perceived race to catch up to what Marvel did with everything that they have to do. Is everything has to be a universe now. It just can't be a standalone trilogy of movies. It has to tie into something larger because now you're now not only are you making this movie, you're making a advertisement for what your next project is going to be. I honestly I hate post credit scenes nowadays. I think they need to be over. Granted, I think for the Toxic Avenger one, because it just ended up being cheesy and fun, and yeah, one of them set it up for a sequel, but that happened like right at the end of the movie, so it wasn't like a super necessary thing to sit around for a long time. Whereas, spoilers, the post-credit scene to the Toxic Avenger is him making a grilled cheese sandwich.
Wow, how fun and quaint.
I kind of love those old credit scenes because, like you said, it's now just an advertisement for the future films. Like, so slight spoiler for Superman, there really is no purpose for those end credit scenes, just a fun gag to have at the very end. I'm like, I kind of love that because I already know they're gonna make a sequel. I knew that right when they finished watching it, they're gonna make a new one like that, and they already announced a new one. Versus now, it's just, are you gonna watch this next film? Like, are you gonna be excited for this random cameo for a character you might not know, I might know, or do you want to see this random scene that might never go anywhere? Because there's a compilation online of Marvel Cinematic Universe post-credit scenes that have gone absolutely nowhere, and they probably won't ever go anywhere because they just didn't know what to do with it, or they wrote themselves in a corner. They're like, oh shit, hope nobody remembers it now.
Eternals.
Yeah.
Oh, the less said about the movie, the better, because the fact that they just immediately like, hey guys, we know we messed up. Let's just get rid of this completely, because they could have done so much more with that. But nope, they gave up on it already.
Or even characters that, like, let's be real. Yeah, maybe in the comic book world they cross over, but the movie world doesn't need, don't be wrong, he's my favorite superhero, but Constantine doesn't need to be in the cinematic universe of Marvel. It just wouldn't make sense. And I like that this Superman, we knew that there was a third one coming. They announced it, but they didn't release it until much later. And I kind of like that this one ends in such a nice, clean way. You're pretty sure there'll be more Spider-Man. This made sense. But it kind of ends on just he's going to keep being Spider-Man. Go Spider-Man. And you're like, yeah, go Spider-Man. Yeah. It's a little weird with the Mary Jane questioning the ceremony and running away, because honestly, we haven't spent a whole lot of time with her.
No, she's problematic in this entire trilogy, and I really didn't notice it until I rewatched it. I'm like, wow, this is so not okay. A lot of my notes are like, that's not okay.
No, once you're adult, Mary Jane's a lot less cute.
Oh, yeah.
Here is my biggest complaint with this movie.
I knew it.
Is, one, I get tired of the love triangle because everything is so wishy-washy. I am just tired of it.
Yeah.
I do give, this is where I think Harry's character is great, even like he's failing in everything.
Sure.
But he still is, he's able to get over his issues with Peter to save MJ. But goddamn, MJ is such a bitch in this movie.
Yeah.
Where she leaves this dude at the altar who has nothing to do with Spider-Man at all, other than he's the son of the Daily Bugle guy and also an astronaut. He's like supposed to be like this perfect, pretty boy that, Starlet MJ's gonna have this great life with him.
Yeah.
Whereas Peter's in this one bedroom apartment. But like she has so much time to tell him, and on top of that, she tries to relive that spark of the upside down kiss
Yeah.
with this guy. It's like,
God, yeah, I
Yeah.
hated that so much, and I don't know how I missed that until this watch. I'm like, wow, I despise that so much. I'm sorry, I just had to put that out there because I was pissed seeing that the other day.
No, and I think this is a huge difference between watching this movie as like a kid or a teenager and watching it as an adult with a fully finished developing brain.
mhm.
Because as a high school student, I was kind of like, oh my god, no, they're meant to be. They're like really in love.
Yeah, exactly.
And as an adult, I'm like, wow, MJ, this is a bad choice, my girl. This other man is, in fact, perfect. And just because he doesn't kiss good upside down is not a reason.
Or did you ever love him in the first place?
Or did you even love him in the first place?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much more, like, you, as an adult, you realize there's so much more complexity to love and deciding who you're going to marry than just like, oh, sparks flew the first time we kissed and he swung me through New York City. And you're like, okay, that is romantic and cool and maybe the base to a good relationship, but like it's clearly not enough.
Well, and it's also a bit where Parker's an asshole too, of like,
Yeah,
he pretends to be something he can't be. And I mean, granted, it's all for his growth. I mean, he puts on the glasses that serve as his mask to return to who he was before Spider-Man.
mm-hmm.
But it also proves that he can't handle it, and they still end up together. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, I can't be that person for you. And then she's like, that's fine.
Oh, and here's the thing that as an adult, especially woman, that really drives me crazy is the reward for Peter of essentially saving the day and growing a little, because he does have some growth in this movie as far as like realizing what his responsibilities are and maybe like how he needs to like focus on certain things in his life if he wants them to change. Great. But the reward should not be a girl who essentially he has gotten over and is letting, like, he's not even at her wedding. He is letting her do her own thing. The reward should not be for a movie with supposed morals, because this is a superhero movie. There has to be some form of moral story. That's how they work. That shouldn't be the reward. The reward should have been like, oh, you got a little bit of a promotion at work. You now have a decent job. Someone accidentally ordered pizza to your house and your aunt is fine. Like that would have been a more like better example reward than just like, if you act right, the girl who dumped you will probably come back and love you.
Yeah,
like that's a shitty message.
Yeah, that really is.
It's that whole like stupid proverb of if you love it, let it go, and if it was meant to be, it'll come back like it's a goddamn boomerang.
It's not a goddamn boomerang. And also, like, again, this is a movie that essentially is supposed to be teaching children to like, hey, once you become an adult, it's gonna suck, it's gonna be hard. You can relate to Spider-Man. He's been there too. Spider-Man did it, and he got the hot chick that he honestly probably does not love that much.
You want to get laid, save a bunch of people on a train.
And granted, I think when this movie came out, that was the scene we were all like just so obsessed and focused on.
Oh, I love the train. It's such a good scene, though.
It's such a good scene.
It is. It's like it's 10 out of 10. I have to say it.
It's maybe the best Spider-Man scene of all time.
Yeah, because it's the antithesis of him being this neighborhood figure of he's saved all these people, he's stood up to this, and he technically still loses. It's his self-sacrificial moment in return to be that for the people of like, oh, and then the people stand up to him. Mm-hmm. It's not just them throwing crap at the Green Goblin that's going to end up in the river and pollute everything.
Yeah.
It's him actively sacrificing himself, and then they'll be like, oh, he's just one of us. We don't know who this stranger is. We're not going to tell anyone, even though if we run into him in the street, we'll give him the head nod.
And I would argue the closest we get to a proper power scale for a Spider-Man in any of the Spider like iterations. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, he's been holding back so long to save anyone and he loses it this one time. Like, we see with good physics a full extent of power, and then also it feels rewarding to like finally build up like what you talked about at the beginning, where like he now finally feels like he belongs in the neighborhood of New York City. He feels like a feature now.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I had a really dumb thought of him finally hooking up with MJ and be like, I'm webbing.
Oh my god. Well, the joke that every Spider-Man person has ever made, I'm sure. So
yeah, he's really shooting webs now.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but no, I agree. That scene is the best. It's the best scene in the entire trilogy.
I would argue any of
Yeah.
the Spider-Mans.
Well, I think there's a lot that could be said there as it is because it shows just I think the two of them at their peak moments. Because if when I was watching this, I noticed pretty heavily. Obviously, every time he got punched, he would fall back and the arms would save him. But you notice that Doc Ock knows he can't win the fight by hand to hand because he just can't. So he's keeping his distance the entire time, and Peter's trying to close the gap the whole time. Every time he gets close to him, he just chucks him or he moves out of the way. I love that and just how good the action looked for the most part because, like I said earlier, you
Mhm.
really only notice the bad CGI in their faces, like because Peter you don't really see it a whole lot, but Doc Ock when you see his face, I'm like, oh god, that is PS2 level graphics right there because it just shows. But again, 21 years ago, it looked probably okay. Now, don't I
Oh, are you kidding me? It looked amazing seeing it in theaters. I was back in the States by this point.
Yeah, no, we thought
but
it looked so cool, and now looking back, we've seen the future. But this
yeah.
really solidifies because I think the first one left it a bit open as far as what sort of Spider-Man we get, and I like that this movie ends with a more superhero based Spider-Man, whereas we move into tech Spider-Man in the later ones.
Mm.
And I don't know, I feel like this one really like solidifies the New York's like quintessential superhero Spider-Man. He still feels like a kid. It feels like it fits with the character because we know he's a smart kid from the first one, but we don't play off of that in any way. And there's no like fancy rich person to like supply him with random ass shit in this one because he pissed off and killed his only rich friend's dad. So
Yeah,
maybe don't kill your rich friend's dad if you want stuff, but
I guess. But Cal, one thing I do want to ask you about this is there is a little bit of a tonal shift in this movie. And granted, I think it's with more writers and maybe Raimi having a little bit more control. But I feel this movie gets a little bit more comedic. What do you think of that?
I agree. I think more just the fact that we're seeing him more fleshed out and he's more confident at a point with his character because he's making quips, he's making jokes. Like it makes more sense because in the comics that's kind of his thing. He's always cracking jokes. He's always known to be the wisecracker and always is. If he's quiet, you're shit out of luck that you're done. So I like that and it kind of makes sense because I know Raimi's a really big comic fan. He's talked about comics in interviews and he just loves Spider-Man as it is. So it makes sense because, like I said, Spider-Man. The first one, it felt like kind of a testing ground for him because he wanted to see how it would work. And like I said, there are things that I love, like Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn, probably one of the best things of that film. But also, I didn't feel as much. There was as many quips, and there's more. He didn't feel as Spider-Man esque versus this one. He felt more like him with just overall, like he made his jokes. He struggled, and we all related to that as it is, and just seeing his evolution over time. So, I also think it's really interesting because I noticed this on this watch through. They probably were trying to make it a little bit like Superman because so some of the writers on that were actually writers on Smallville. It was a Superman TV show that came out, and while I will admit I never saw all of Smallville, I only really saw season 1 because I thought it was too cheesy. I think I can see a lot of the similarities there with the writing because just from the very early episodes of seeing Clark and when he was trying to grow into Superman versus this version of Spider-Man, I could see a lot of similarities between the two of them and what they were trying to go for. So
I agree. No, you definitely. Now that you pointed out, I definitely see the Smallville vibes. Granted, early Smallville. I know that show goes on for
very early
forever, but
I didn't even know Smallville was a Superman show until like way, way into high school. And only reason I knew about Smallville is there were commercials for it when I watched Supernatural.
Okay, well, yeah, definitely Superman.
I know now.
Okay.
Chris, what do you think about the change of tone into being more comedic?
I actually do like it. My favorite Spider-Man is the cartoon Spider-Man, where he has lots of room for one-liners, lots of room to be silly and quippy. Granted, he has a lot more superheroes to bounce off of in those, just because it's animated and the budget's only as high as you're willing to draw. So I'm glad to see it. I also think it kind of lends to this idea that he's maturing into like his final super Spider-Man form, or just even Peter Parker's growing up and like feeling more confident. He felt so awkward in the first one, but that's kind of why we liked him. It's my main reason why Tobey's my favorite awkward Spider-Man adult, like live action.
So the comedy shows the building in confidence then.
I think so, because I mean, eventually we're going to get we're gonna lose the plot coming up, unfortunately. But I see how with this level of confidence and with the one-liners and the jokes, I see where potentially Raimi was kind of hoping to take this series with having him be much more one-liners, starting to see, hopefully, I think there was, like you said, an interest in having other superheroes join these movies and like have some cameos. And having that play off of each other was definitely something that I know they wanted to do. And so I can see how, like, oh, the third one, they could have introduced more. There could have even been more back and forth, really get that, like, quick thinking one-liners under his belt. By the fourth and fifth one, have that really be his thing and have it just kind of be a franchise from there. And as we'll see with the third one, unfortunately, a lot of plans changed.
Yeah, no, I definitely think the comedic change is good for this one. But yeah, we'll get into the third one here shortly.
Oh, boy.
Actually, as much as I love the first two, I couldn't wait to review this one because I know we're going to have a fun time talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
So, Cal, what do you give on a good, bad, weird rating Spider-Man 2?
I definitely give it a good. I still think it's probably one of the strongest Spider-Man live-action films ever. I mean, I love No Way Home. I think it's definitely good for nostalgia, but like I just said, it's just nostalgia at the end of the day, done right, and fan service done right versus this. Still holds up really well for the most part. We have some problems. All of us agreed upon it, and I've talked to friends after watching it. I'm like, that's not very well. It hasn't aged very well, but overall, I love it. I think it holds up well, and I think the game, especially because this came with a movie tie-in game, was also amazing. So
the game was very good.
It was just fun to swing around. That's all we really did. Let's be real. We all just web swinged and shot the balloon in the air that some kid let go for some reason.
But man, they managed to make it so fun. And yeah, I remember that game coming out and like there was free demos in Walmart. So you could play that game and then go watch the movie at home. And you were like, oh, I'm so immersed. Spider-Man. And like, even if you grew up and Spider-Man wasn't your favorite superhero, boy, this movie really solidified itself in your memory.
Yep.
So then, Chris, what do you rate Spider-Man 2?
I also give it a good. I think this is one of the few that, like, you really don't have to have the first one for this to be a good movie. You can watch this. Granted, obviously it's better if you have the knowledge of the background of the first one, but I don't think you need it. I think this is a perfectly good movie on its own, and that's really hard to say for a sequel.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a good rating too. I do think knowing a little bit of the at least some of the plot points that came before help tie into it, but outside of that, it is a pretty standalone movie. Like I said, I think they do a bit of a repeat, but they do it in a different way that makes it more interesting and more of a fatherly character rather than, okay, he's supposed to be kind of an Uncle Ben replacement, but he's not really.
Too bad he's evil.
Yeah. That's been Spider-Man 2. We're taking a bit of a turn for the finale, so buckle yourselves in as we dance a little too groovily through the next or the end of the Sam Raimi trilogy.
Prepare for the worst.
But this has been the good, the bad, and the weird spotlights.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace.